I need to share something with you all in a completely honest and direct way. During my 9 years serving as a Marine, I witnessed situations that defied any immediate logical explanation. The vast majority of these occurrences found perfectly rational justifications when more technically qualified people analyzed the facts. Failures in communication equipment, exhaustion caused by the intense desert heat. I especially remember that occasion in 29 Palms when half of my team swore they observed luminous formations moving in a coordinated manner over the desert terrain. Later, we discovered it was just an exercise with flares from another unit that simply forgot to inform us about the operation. However, there was one specific night at Camp Pendleton, in the training areas near what we called the Back 40, that remains etched in my memory in a completely different way. I was on security duty in a field during a night shift around 3 in the morning, that dead hour where your mind starts playing tricks and creating illusions. I was monitoring my sector through the nods, the night vision goggles, when I spotted a coyote positioned about 50 meters from my location. There was nothing particularly strange about it initially, considering coyotes were extremely common sightings in that region. But this specific animal was completely motionless, with its gaze fixed directly on my position. Wild animals normally don't exhibit this kind of behavior. They usually flee when they detect human presence or simply ignore us completely, going on their way. But this one remained perfectly static, maintaining direct eye contact with me for 5 solid, uninterrupted minutes. My team leader, Sergeant Martinez, also noticed that abnormal behavior. He whispered with a tense voice, "Are you seeing that?" I confirmed yes, that the creature hadn't moved a millimeter. We watched that animal for approximately 10 full minutes. During all that time, it never looked away, never shifted its body weight from one paw to another, remaining completely frozen like a living statue. And then something happened that I swear on my life is absolutely true. The creature slowly turned and began to walk away from our position, but it did so on its hind legs, standing upright like a human for about 3 deliberate steps before dropping back down to all fours and disappearing completely into the underbrush. Martinez and I simply exchanged looks in absolute silence. Neither of us uttered a single word about what happened at that moment. We filed that experience away in that mental category of things you just don't discuss with other people because it will sound completely insane. But that image remained etched in my consciousness. Something about the way that animal moved was profoundly wrong, fundamentally incorrect on a level I can't explain with adequate words. I mention this personal experience because the story I'm about to share with you involves soldiers who witnessed something incredibly stranger and more disturbing than a coyote with bizarre posture. And unlike my experience, they didn't have the privilege of simply observing from a safe distance. This narrative happened at Fort Huachuca, Arizona. The exact year isn't completely clear in the various sources I found during my research, but multiple references place the incident sometime between the late 2000s and early 2010s. 2 Army soldiers, a routine night patrol, and an encounter that neither of them could ever explain in a satisfactory or rational way. Before we dive deeply into this story, I need to provide essential context about exactly where this occurred and what these soldiers might have encountered that night. Because if you don't understand what skinwalkers are, really understand what they represent in Navajo tradition, then this narrative won't make any sense at all. Fort Huachuca is located in the southeastern corner of Arizona, about 15 miles north of the Mexican border. The military installation sprawls across the northern end of the Huachuca Mountains, a name derived from a local obscure indigenous language meaning place of thunder. If you've ever visited that region during monsoon season, you understand perfectly why that name. Dark clouds cascade down the mountainside while lightning cuts across the desert sky, transforming the entire landscape into something primitive and ancestral. The Army established Camp Huachuca on March 3, 1877, during the Apache Wars that marked that historical period. It became a permanent fortress in 1882 and served as the advanced headquarters for General Nelson Miles during the final campaigns in Arizona in 1886. After the Army closed more than 50 garrisons scattered across Arizona territory, Fort Huachuca remained as the only active military post in the region. Over the next century and a half, it served as a training ground, intelligence center, and home to thousands of soldiers who passed through its facilities. Today, Fort Huachuca houses the United States Army Intelligence Center and the Network Enterprise Technology Command. It's an expansive installation with over 18,000 people present during workdays. The base is situated on the edge of vast expanses of undeveloped land, training areas, firing ranges, and desert that stretches for miles in every possible direction. During the day, It looks like any other conventional military installation. But at night, when you're patrolling those remote areas, the place takes on a completely different, more ancient feel, as if you're walking through territory that belongs to something beyond human comprehension. The fort is located in Cochise County, named after the famous Apache leader. To the north and west lie the territories of several American Indian nations, including the Tohono O'odham and the Pascua Yaqui. But the people whose traditions are most relevant to this story are the Navajo, or the Diné, as they call themselves. The Navajo Nation is the largest American Indian territory in the United States, covering portions of Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. Although the heart of the nation is several hundred miles northeast of Fort Huachuca, the Navajo people have lived, worked, and served throughout Arizona for generations, bringing their ancestral stories with them. In Navajo culture, there is a specific type of sorcerer called Yi Naldlushi. The literal translation means, by means of it, he goes on all fours. In English, we call them skinwalkers. I need to be extremely careful here. Stories of skinwalkers are deeply rooted in Navajo spiritual tradition, and discussing them is considered taboo within the community. According to Dr. Adrienne Keene, a scholar and writer from the Cherokee Nation, talking about these beings outside of their appropriate cultural context can be harmful and disrespectful. These are not things that need or should be discussed by outsiders, she wrote in response to non-native authors incorporating skinwalker legends into their literary works. I'm sorry if that seems unfair, but that's how our cultures survive through the generations. I respect that completely and deeply. I'm not Navajo, and don't claim any special knowledge of their sacred spiritual practices. What I can share is what has been documented in serious anthropological studies, and what soldiers, including Navajo soldiers, have reported experiencing personally. This isn't about sensationalizing sacred traditions for entertainment. It's about trying to understand what happened to two men on patrol at Fort Huachuca and why it scared them so deeply that they're still talking about it years later. According to Clyde Kluckhohn's 1944 anthropological study, Navajo Witchcraft, skinwalkers are practitioners of the witchcraft path, a dark perversion of traditional healing practices. While medicine men and women use their knowledge to heal and help their communities, skinwalkers use similar powers to cause harm and suffering. The transformation process is deliberate and voluntary, not a curse like lycanthropy in European folklore. To become a skinwalker, according to the legends, a person must commit a profound taboo, often murdering a close family member. This act supposedly grants them the ability to transform into animals, most commonly coyotes, wolves, foxes, bears, or owls. But here's what makes skinwalkers particularly disturbing in the stories passed down through generations. They don't just look like ordinary animals. They move in a wrong, unnatural way. Their eyes are incorrect, glowing red when light hits them in animal form, or looking disturbingly animal-like when in human form. They can imitate human voices perfectly. They possess supernatural speed and strength. And according to Navajo belief, they can read thoughts and control minds if they establish direct eye contact with someone. This is why discussing skinwalkers is taboo within Navajo culture. It's not just empty superstition. For the Navajo, talking about these beings can attract their unwanted attention. Acknowledging them, naming them, gives them power. And exposing sacred knowledge to outsiders weakens the spiritual protections that have been passed down through generations. Sometime between 2008 and 2012, during the height of military operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, when Fort Huachuca was training thousands of intelligence analysts and communication soldiers, two Army soldiers experienced something that would change their lives forever. Let's call them Specialist Davis and Private First Class Martinez, though these aren't their real names. Davis was the senior man, 24 years old, 3 years into his enlistment with the 111th Military Intelligence Brigade. Martinez was 21, newer to the Army, but not inexperienced enough to panic at shadows. Both had done perimeter security details dozens of times before. This should have been just another routine night. Their shift started at 2200 hours, 10 at night. They'd drawn the midnight patrol, which meant walking a designated route along the eastern perimeter of the training area until 0600 the next morning. 8 hours walking through the darkness with nothing but flashlights, radios, and each other's company. They checked out their gear at the armory. Radios, flashlights, reflective belts, clipboards for their patrol logs. Standard issue. No weapons. This wasn't a combat zone, just routine security. Their job was to check locks on buildings, look for damaged fences, report anything unusual, and generally make sure no one was in the training areas who shouldn't be there. The sun had set 2 hours earlier. By the time they reached their patrol route, total darkness had settled over the desert. It was late summer or early fall. The temperature was comfortable, which in Arizona means between 70 and 85 degrees after sunset. Monsoon season had ended, so the air was dry and still. "You good?" Davis asked as they started walking. "Yeah, man. Same night, different day." They fell into an easy, familiar rhythm. The patrol route followed a dirt road that ran parallel to the perimeter fence, winding through sections of scrub brush and creosote that looked identical in every direction. Without the road, you could get lost out there in minutes. The training area stretched for miles, with firing ranges, obstacle courses, land navigation courses, all empty after dark, except for the occasional patrol like theirs. The night sounds were exactly what you'd expect in the Sonoran Desert. Coyotes yipping in the distance, the occasional rustle of something small moving through the brush, probably a jackrabbit or kangaroo rat. The wind picked up around midnight, making the creosote bushes whisper and the chain-link fence rattle where it sagged between posts. Every sound seemed amplified in the darkness, but neither of them was particularly bothered. Around 0100 hours, 1 in the morning, they reached a checkpoint along their route, a small concrete pad with a lockbox mounted on a post. Davis pulled out his clipboard and logged the time and location. Martinez swept his flashlight over the area, checking the fence line. Everything looked completely normal and up to standard. "How far to the turnaround point?" Martinez asked casually. "Maybe another click. Then we head back and do it all over again." "Awesome." The word dripped sarcasm. They continued down the dirt road as it curved northeast, following the contour of a low ridge. To their left, the desert opened up, miles of empty land stretching toward the Huachuca Mountains, which were just a darker silhouette against the night sky. To their right, the chain-link perimeter fence marked the boundary of the training area. Beyond that fence was more desert, more nothing, eventually leading to private ranch lands and then the Mexican border 15 miles south. The fence itself was 8 feet tall, topped with 3 strands of outward-angled barbed wire. Every 100 yards or so, a metal sign, "Restricted Area, Authorized Personnel Only." The fence was old, installed decades ago, and in some sections had that sagging, weathered look that comes from years of desert sun and relentless wind. At 0145 hours, they were approaching another checkpoint when Martinez stopped walking abruptly. "You seeing that?" Davis looked up from his clipboard. "Seeing what?" "Up ahead, by the fence." Davis followed Martinez's gaze carefully. About 50 meters ahead, near where the road curved closest to the fence line, something was moving. A figure. It looked like a person standing just inside the fence, maybe 10 feet from the wire barrier. "Hey!" Davis shouted with authority. "This is a restricted area. Identify yourself immediately." The figure didn't respond, didn't move, just stood there, a dark silhouette against the slightly less dark desert beyond. Davis grabbed his radio quickly. "This is Patrol 2. We have a possible intruder at checkpoint Delta 7. One individual approximately 50 meters from our position. Requesting backup." The radio crackled with static. "Patrol 2, copy. Back up en route. ETA 10 minutes. Do not approach. Maintain visual and report any changes." "Copy that." Martinez pointed his flashlight directly at the figure. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a disturbingly elderly-looking man. He was maybe 70, 75 years old, thin, almost skeletal in build. He wore dark pants and what looked like a light-colored shirt, though it was hard to tell exactly in the flashlight beam. His face was deeply lined, wrinkled like old leather left in the sun for decades. He stood perfectly still, hands at his sides, staring directly at them without blinking. "Sir," Davis called out loud and clear, "you are in a restricted military area. You need to leave immediately." No response. The old man just stared, unmoving. "This is weird," Martinez muttered under his breath. "Yeah, no kidding." Davis raised his voice again, trying to establish communication. "Sir, can you hear me? This is military property. You're trespassing." Still nothing. The man's expression didn't change at all. He didn't blink once, didn't shift his weight from one foot to the other, just stood there like a stone statue. He was maybe 40 meters away now, since they'd closed the distance slightly without really thinking about it. "What the hell is he doing out here?" Martinez whispered with growing unease. "There's absolutely nothing for miles." "No idea, but he's on our side of the fence. That's the problem." They were maybe 30 meters away now, close enough to see more details in the flashlight beams. The old man's clothes were poor, worn, and tattered. His face had that hollow, wasted quality you sometimes see in people who've lived extremely hard lives. His eyes were dark pits and shadowed sockets, but they never left Davis and Martinez, never blinked even once. "Sir, we're going to need you to turn around and walk back toward the access road. Do you understand what I'm saying?" The old man slowly opened his mouth. For a second, Davis thought he was finally going to say something, but no sound emerged. Just that open mouth, dark like a deep cave without light. And then he smiled. It wasn't a friendly greeting smile, not a nervous, caught-where-I-shouldn't-be smile. It was something completely different, something deeply disturbing. A wide, impossible smile that showed too many teeth, arranged in an unnatural way. Wrong. That was the single word that shot through Martinez's mind like a bolt. Wrong, wrong, wrong on every possible level. "What the hell?" Martinez started to say. The old man's body jerked violently. Not like he was moving voluntarily, but like something invisible had grabbed him and yanked hard. His knees buckled at unnatural angles, his spine curved in a way that should have snapped, his arms shot forward, hands splaying wide open. And then, according to both detailed accounts, what happened next took maybe 3 or 4 seconds, but felt frozen in infinite time. Every microscopic detail burned into their memories with perfect, crystalline clarity. The old man's body convulsed in a violent, terrifying way. His limbs elongated impossibly and grotesquely. His torso expanded beyond any normal human proportion. His head twisted at an angle that should have snapped his neck instantly. And his skin seemed to ripple and shift, like something was moving visibly underneath it, trying to escape. The transformation wasn't smooth or gradual like in movies. It was violent, wrong, and physically impossible, according to all known laws of biology and physics. One moment, there was an old man standing in the desert under the flashlight beams. The next, there was a gigantic rabbit where he had been. But it wasn't a normal rabbit by any means. This creature was massive, maybe 4 feet tall when it reared up on its hind legs. Its fur was matted and dark, brownish-gray in the flashlight beam. Its ears were too long for any natural rabbit, dangling past its shoulders. And its eyes were still human, dark, intelligent, piercing, staring directly at them with the same unrelenting intensity the old man had shown moments before. "Jesus Christ Almighty," Davis whispered, his voice shaking uncontrollably. The gigantic rabbit dropped to all fours with a heavy thud. It moved with a speed that shouldn't have been possible for something that size. A blur of motion heading east, parallel to the fence line, away from them quickly. In seconds, it had covered 50 meters, 100 meters. It disappeared completely into the darkness beyond their weak flashlight beams. Both soldiers stood completely frozen, paralyzed, trying to mentally process what they'd just witnessed with their own eyes. The radios crackled with broken static. The backup patrol was 5 minutes out, requesting status update. Davis raised his radio with a visibly shaking hand. His mouth opened, but no words came out at first. What the hell was he supposed to report officially? That they just watched an old man physically transform into a giant rabbit with human eyes? "Patrol 2, report status immediately." Davis's voice cracked and broke. "The individual is no longer at this location. Repeat. He left the area?" Yes, he left completely." "Copy. Continue, Patrol. Backup will meet you at checkpoint Delta 8. Davis lowered the radio slowly. He and Martinez looked at each other in absolute heavy silence. Neither spoke. Neither knew exactly what to say, what words to use to process that. And then Martinez grabbed Davis's arm hard and pointed with a trembling finger. 40 meters beyond the fence, outside the restricted area in the open desert, the old man was standing there again. The exact same old man. Same tattered clothes, same skeletal build, same hollow, wasted face, just standing there watching them in absolute silence, smiling that horrible, impossible smile, too wide for any normal human mouth. For maybe 10 eternal seconds, neither soldier moved a millimeter. They just stood there in the complete darkness, flashlight beams wavering slightly from the uncontrollable tremor in their hands, staring at the old man who was now standing outside the fence. Impossibly outside the fence. Because they'd just watched him transform into a gigantic rabbit and run in the completely opposite direction only moments before. Continues. Thanks for watching. Comment if you want part 2 and where you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel, like, and share. See you in the next video.